You're probably wondering what I'm doing at a dealership, and if you want the answer to that, it's that reason right there why I'm here. Alright guys, now we're inside the 2019 Hyundai Veloster Turbo Ultimate. Now this is a fully loaded model. Now as you can see from my point of view, you already see some nice colored accents. This particular model is the chalk white with the white interior, or I think they call it gray. If you've seen some of the other reviewers, they have the yellow accenting, which I was actually not fond of. This one, however, gets a pass from me because it's got the nice red accents. I'm not going to go too in depth because I know that if you guys are really interested in buying this, you guys are obviously going to look at a legitimate review video. So this is more of a hands-on, but there's just a few things I wanted to point out. So first and foremost, the gauge cluster. Right now it's stating the key is not in the vehicle, so that's cool. Most cars have some sort of display like that. But just going into the menu system, we're in park right now. This is the dual clutch transmission version, being the ultimate. You have your traditional fuel economy, you have your accumulated info for your trips, your drive info, your actual speedometer that's there in digital format, your driving, whether you're being economical or aggressive, and your transmission temperature, which from what I've heard, it's actually a feature on the previous Velosters. You just wouldn't get that unless you had the ultimate package back then. So that's kind of neat, especially if you're planning on taking this for like autocross. Having that temperature gauge is really nice. The other thing that I like is the gauges. They do feel a lot like my gauges in the R-Spec, obviously with a little more splash of color. You have kind of like the gray bezels with the red trim. The red needles come back, so I really dig these gauges as opposed to... I really like these gauges as opposed to the first generation Veloster that had the typical Hyundai blue ones before the revision, like on my model. Another thing is the heads-up display, which is, you know, nice and not intrusive. I'm gonna try to zoom in to see if you guys can see it. But so right there, you see the miles per hour. One cool thing is this actually changes depending on the drive mode. So if you're in the normal drive mode, this is basically what you're gonna see. And while you're driving, because of the built-in navigation, it'll also give you the road signs for the speed limits wherever you're at. But one cool thing is once you go into sport mode, that's actually where it changes. So the lower gauges don't change anything. As you can see, like there's no like splash of new color or anything. But the difference is on the heads-up display that when you get into sport mode, you get this little digital tachometer and your digital miles per hour, and also what gear you're in. Right now we're in park, but I'm gonna put it into drive so you can see, and it says drive. You could obviously be in sport mode and still have it in automatic, or you could basically put it into manual shifting, and then as you can see, you have your gears. So that's kind of cool. In this mode, from what I've noticed from driving, that's the only thing you'll actually see is the tachometer with your speed and your gear selection. You're not going to get distracted by seeing speed limit signs. So that's actually a really cool touch. Another cool feature that I actually can't demonstrate since I'm at a standstill is that even if you're in normal mode, the moment you tap one of the paddle shifters, it actually immediately jumps into sport mode. And basically this will be replaced immediately by that digital tachometer. So that's super cool. A few of the gripes that I have is that you actually have, the steering wheel is really nice. I like the accents. I like how it's kind of going with the theme. You see the red there, you see the red here, the red in the seats, and the red all over. But one thing I'm actually kind of upset is that they didn't go with the flat bottom steering wheel like on the Elantra Sport. I feel like that's a missed opportunity because especially for a sportier feeling car, I feel like you could have gone for that. So, you know, that's just a little gripe. It's little things that I'm noticing here and there. You once again have automatic climate control, this being the ultimate. And then I do like that there are physical buttons to do things on the infotainment system. Obviously for some of you guys that have driven some of the Hondas, which is obviously one of the main competitors, the Civic Si, they do have the all-touch infotainment systems, and for some of you guys that might be annoying. So just pointing out little tidbits here and there. Again, this being the ultimate, you see a lot of buttons and a lot of stuff, and that's just because once again it has all of the Hyundai assistance features like lane assist and adaptive cruise control and all that good stuff. So those are kind of positives. Again, you're talking the ultimate, you know, you have the heated seats if you're familiar with that. So little things that I'm noticing here and there. For those of you that care, I'm actually going to show you the little digital screen, what it all goes through. So This you have just a basic compass. There's no changing there. The top obviously displays your what gear you're in and your estimated fuel mileage, so that's cool. The little symbol on the bottom is just because I had lane assistance, so you could turn it off, so I just did that. There you go. Other features in that thing are basically driver attention warning, tire pressure, so if you want to check that first thing in the morning without getting an actual light. System off, this is again for the lane assistance, so if I turn it on, there you go, it tells you that it's on. And the cool thing is, in the settings, you can actually adjust how aggressive that is, whether you want to be warned right away or a little bit more of latency. So there's a lot of cool customization there in case you don't want to be annoyed. And finally, this is the user settings where you can change everything from having the heads-up display, or if it actually distracts you, you could actually have it go down by going into this menu. You could just have it adjust the brightness, the rotation, you know, what it's displaying, the speed size, the speed color. So it's white, you can change to orange, green. Oh, so let's see. Oh, there it's at orange, and there it is at green. We're gonna go back to white. Don't want to mess with this too much. Speed size, so it's at medium right now, but if you feel like, it bumps it up a little bit inside for large. Going back to medium. So again, it's got some cool little things that you can mess with on your own. The sport display, there's not much, it just adjusts what you see when you're in sport mode. So your usual, you know, how your door locks work, your lights, the convenience, your little introduction sound when you come in, convenience features, service intervals, things like that. So much of the same overall. If I did miss something obviously in here that you guys were really wanting to know about, please just, you know, in the comments down below, let me know. I mean, again, I'm not going over everything just because I feel like it's unnecessary. All of these come standard now with the Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. With this, I believe it's an 8-inch screen, so that's kind of nice. Oh, last thing I guess I should note is that you should be familiar with the aluminum pedals, but now they actually have the rest pedal also being of the same type. So that's kind of nice, you know, little added flares here and there. And for those of you that remember, also previously we had the Dimension sound system. Now it comes with the name brand Infinity. Even though I hear that Dimension was basically a cheaper branding for Infinity, so take that as you will. Lastly, on the Ultimate, this one also has a Qi or Qi charger, which is wireless charging, whether you have one of the newer iPhones or numerous Android devices that support that. Your 12 volt, your auxiliary, your USB, and another USB. This one meant for charging, this one meant for actually plugging into the infotainment, for those of you trying to do Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. Oh, and I guess the last thing, which is super important to me, is cup holders. Yep, you got two, nicely placed. And no electronic parking, you have your traditional handle e-brake, so that's pretty neat. Actually, speaking of the heads-up display, for those of you guys that are annoyed by it, there's actually this quick button here that I press to put it away, but you can press it to bring it back up. So unlike some of the other vehicles that have this stationary and you can't do anything about it, again, if it annoys you, then you could actually put it away or bring it up whenever you'd like. So that's kind of a neat option. Lastly, the infotainment is actually very smooth. If you've ever played with one of the previous gen ones that had the tech package, very familiar format, so you'll be very used to this. But enough of the inside, let's go outside and just have a look at what it looks like. So the most important part, and the part that I like personally the most, is the rear end. So that's where I'm starting off. You still have the dual exhaust coming out of the center with the diffuser, so that's super nice. It's kind of a tribute to the first generation. I know some of you guys have mixed emotions about the rear end. I'm actually really fond of the taillights. They still have that little funny swerving around the edges, around the corners. So again, similar to the first generation. I do like this spoiler a lot better. I feel like it just kind of, it's longer outward. I wish that the first generations would have had a slightly longer spoiler. And I know a lot of you guys feel the same way. I won't lie to you, these new rims I really like, especially that red center accent. I also like that this car sits lower. So I know a lot of people haven't pointed that out, but as opposed to the stock first gen Veloster, it's not as high. Also to note is that the suspension is stiffer, so it's not as cushiony as the first gen was. So that's just something to point out. Don't know if it's specific to the turbo model. I guess we'll find out later on. Few tidbits to complain about is that the rear reflectors are the same for both the nav or the naturally aspirated model and this turbo model. So long and gone are the days where you could look at the back of a Veloster and know immediately if it was naturally aspirated or a turbo model, unless the badges are there like this, which obviously tells us it's a 1.6 turbo. Going to the side, just pointing out, we have these new turbo badges, which is actually kind of neat. They all come in the same color, so don't think that it's going to change color depending on, you know, whatever scheme you have. I don't know how I feel about the off-color side skirts and not matching. I guess it's kind of their way of being a little sportier. But again, even in the previous Velosters, like my black one, the front, rear, and side lips have, you know, a different color than black, so typical Veloster fashion. We still have the quirky third door, so that's super nice. And as typical, same amount of room. Forgive me for the bad lighting. Same amount of room, no surprises there. Still the two cup holders and a little pocket to hold a cell phone or something else. The sound system branding stays and continues towards the back. Now again, having the white model, one thing that you might notice is that the whole roof is black. That is an exclusive thing to the turbo models only. So I guess that's the new way to differentiate them. Forgive me for the AC unit kicking in. But yeah, one way to differentiate the turbo models from the non-turbo is that the turbo models will have the black roof and then the normal paint job, whereas the non-turbo models will all be the same matching paint job from what I'm being told. This one again being the ultimate, you do have this nice large moonroof, LED taillights in the rear for the turbo models, and LED headlights on the front with projectors. And this is kind of what the new headlights look like. I know in pictures and in videos, and unfortunately you guys are watching this as a video, you might not be too fond of it, but the more I look at it, it kind of grows on you. Like it's really nice, and it's, you know, Hyundai's way of stepping things up. One thing I am noticing is the absence of fog lights. I will get confirmation whether that's typical. So I am being told that these red touch accents are actually for the turbo models. Once again, also being told that these little front little inductions, along with the ones on the sides, are actually fully functional. Obviously the front one's going to the intercooler, and the side one's helping out with aerodynamics and to help cool off the brakes. Again, I'm not sure if the new Velosters just won't have fog lights anymore. This is the ultimate, so I would have expected to see them on there, but I'll ask and I'll find out in the future. Again, this is what the new grille looks like. Again, forgive for the lighting because the sun is, you know, out particularly strong today on Memorial Day, but this is what the under the hood looks like. So nice new updated cover, turbo prominently being displayed. Looks a lot, to be honest, like the first gen engine. I don't know if there's been any upgrades. I'm guessing that they've, you know, probably changed a few things, but as you can see, especially since we recently did work on my car, the intake box is in the same fashion. You know, same little scoop coming in here, you know, but I do notice differences right from the start. Like for example, there's no more side induction coming into the airbox. Also, this recirculation hose for the blow valve that used to go right underneath the front bumper, looks like it actually just goes straight down and lower. So there are some changes. Might have been for better efficiency, it might have been just to fit things better, but yeah. Oh, and the final thing, which is kind of, again, I feel like a little bit of a step back, is that the hood prop, long and gone are the gas struts that would hold it up automatically. You know, have to deal with one of these. So this is actually the nav, which is the non-turbo model, and for reference you can see the differences in the LED portion for the front headlights. Even the covers where you would think fog lights go is a little different, and the front grille is a little different. So yeah, just some key differences I'm pointing out since I got to have a little bit of time with this one. As you can see, the roof is actually the same color as the rest of the car, so that's one thing there. Downgrade on the rim size, and let's see if there's any differences in the back. So I did mention that you can't really tell a difference between a turbo and a base model via the back, but actually you can, just based off of the exhaust. Just like the first generation, the non-turbos don't have the circular dual exhaust. It's more of, it is a dual exhaust, but it looks more like an HDMI connection, so we'll go with that. And obviously the 2.0 badge instead of a 1.6 turbo. So guys, that about wraps up the video and the time that I have with the car. I want to give a huge shout out to Hyundai of Escondido for giving me the opportunity to test drive this vehicle the moment they got it. they quite literally only have this as the turbo model and one base model. So I'm really fortunate, and I'm obviously one of the first people that gets to drive it. Let's head to home base, and basically I'll tell you. But real quick, let's go return the car and head off to home base, and I'll tell you how I feel about this new vehicle, the improvements, and my overall driving experience. So let's go back. Hey guys, so we're back at home base. I'd like to give a huge shout out and thank you so much to Hyundai of Escondido for allowing me the opportunity to get my hands on their 1.6 Turbo Ultimate and basically getting to have fun and getting to know it and play with it a little bit. As of the time of the release of this video, dealerships should slowly start getting their Velosters in, but they are getting them in limited quantities just because there's so many of them. So the dealership that I went to, that was actually their only turbo model. I didn't have an opportunity to drive a stick just because they hadn't received one yet. So they basically had just a base 2.0 non-turbo and the 1.6 turbo engine. So I'm very fortunate that I got to get my hands on it, especially since it's a car that's actually up for sale. With that being said, keep in mind that this is a hands-on, this isn't actually a full review, and if you want a full review of the vehicle, I do suggest going to another YouTuber that does that, just to kind of get, you know, the consumer side of it. Obviously this video I was pointing out little things that, you know, they're probably not going to focus on, and this discussion again is made more for the enthusiast rather than the average consumer. I'm not going to touch on price tag just because in a previous video I've mentioned how I think that they currently are overpriced, and it's honestly just the market right now. You know, they are in kind of high demand. It is the latest and greatest, and the Velosters come a long way from the first generation model. But saying that right there is the first thing that I just kind of wanted to acknowledge is that a lot of you guys have mixed emotions about the look and the interior, and I'm with you on it. I do have to tell you that you have to see it in person to really appreciate it. It's actually not as bad as you think, especially from seeing only pictures or videos, including even my own. Once you're in person, the car looks very nice. It looks very aggressive, and it sits, like I mentioned, a little bit lower. It's quite refined. It is sportier. I did mention that the suspension feels a little stiffer as opposed to the first gen, which was a lot more, I'd say, plush. The look will eventually grow on you, and like I said, once you see it in person, it is a night and day difference. I was fortunate enough, obviously, to drive the Ultimate version, which had all the bells and whistles and every particular add-on you could possibly think of, and it's really cool. Some of the stuff is appreciated, not necessary from an enthusiast standpoint. Obviously, I showed you guys the heads-up display, which is one of the newest things and probably one of the coolest features. There's a lot that you could do, and it's really cool that you could have full control over the actual driving assist aids. I thought it was cool that you could adjust the sensitivity on them. Some of them you could turn off. I like the fact that you could turn off the heads-up display if you don't feel like utilizing it. I also like the fact that the moment you tap the paddle shifters, it'll immediately go into sport mode. So you actually don't have to look down at the shifter and press the driving mode button. Tap that and you're immediately into sport mode. One thing that I didn't talk about too much, and just because it would have been a feature that would have taken a long time for me to play with, is that it actually has 3 driving modes. It has normal, it has sport, and then it has something called smart. And from what I'm being told, smart mode is actually a mode that you would customize yourself. So basically it would drive the way you want it. So sport mode is a little too much, or maybe even if it's not enough. Apparently you can adjust certain parameters to get that driving mode that you want. One thing that I did notice is that there is no eco mode in this vehicle. I don't know if the non-turbo models might have an eco mode, but that was kind of a surprising thing. Again, the first generation Veloster wasn't the best when it came to fuel consumption and MPG, so it was a little interesting to see that this car doesn't have an eco mode. But again, looking at it from an enthusiast standpoint, it's probably not a mode that you'd want anyway. That being said, there's a lot of cool stuff to like in the interior, and it's obviously updated, and you know, the price obviously reflects all the extra stuff that they put into this car. But bringing up the interior, one of the really cool things about the original Veloster was actually the interior, in the sense that it was unique to that particular model. It was actually one of the first Hyundais to offer such a large media player standard in all of the turbo models, at least, especially when you even compared it to higher end Sonatas and Elantras. You know, we were actually spoiled with getting such a large screen. The interior, again, was unique to that particular model. With the new Veloster, I feel that the interior is kind of going with all the other Hyundais that are offered. You know, the steering wheel felt a lot like the i30, aka the Elantra GT hatchback. it basically felt like a typical Hyundai interior in line with all the other models, so it lost its uniqueness there. The original Veloster was quirky and different, and should the successor spiritually has that, you know, we have the third door still instead of 4 rear doors, but it just feels different and it looks different, even down to the exterior. The original Veloster was nice and wide and very curvy. This one isn't so much curvy as it is edgy. And for comparison's sake, if you actually compare the front of the Veloster, it looks a lot like the Elantra hatchback, or basically the European i30, and in general the way that all the new Hyundais are starting to look. If one of the original reasons for the first car was because it was so unique and it stood out, you are going to lose a little bit of that with this car. Keep in mind, the rear still looks much like a Veloster and it does stand out, but once you go to the front end, or even the side profile, at least speaking from the driver's side, it loses a little bit of its appeal there. But the important part that you guys want to know is how it performs. And I'm happy to report that it is a newer car. Hyundai has learned a lot from the previous model, and I'm pretty sure you've heard this everywhere already. Independent rear suspension makes a world of a difference. This car is a lot more confident when it comes to twists and turns, especially when you're doing spirited or aggressive driving. The soft draw on the transmission, and honestly I'm not even sure if it's a new dual clutch or if it's the same. It is a 7-speed dual clutch transmission, just like the ones found in the later first gen Velosters. It just responds a lot better. The common gripe on the dual clutch is that coming from a standstill, it has kind of a slight stutter. The same thing applies here on this newer model, but once it's in motion, the car just shines. When you're in sport mode, or if you're at least manually shifting via the paddles, the car actually stays in the gear that you're at, and if you do have it in automatic sport mode, it actually won't shift until you get to a much higher RPM. Again, keeping in line with the way that you would probably shift yourself if you were driving enthusiastically. I thought that was actually a very cool feature and really cool consideration that Hyundai did, just because of the fact that obviously if you're driving sporty, you might want to stay in a particular gear until you're at a higher RPM band for power reasons. So that was actually a really cool takeaway. Again, in normal mode, the transmission shifts the way you would expect it to, so the biggest takeaway is that their sport mode quite literally changes the dynamic of the car, especially when it comes to shift points. It's much more aggressive. You would stay in your power band longer, and actually, like I said, when I was driving this in the twists and turns, I'd be at 3,000 RPM expecting the car to automatically shift, and it would not, because I was in sport mode, because it knew that chances are I wanted to stay in that particular power band until I got to a high enough point where I could shift either up, or if I dropped enough that I would shift down. Speaking of shifting, for what it is, the shifting is very impressive and very responsive. Again, Hyundai hasn't been the best when it comes to the dual clutch, but in this situation, shifting up was as responsive as I'd liked it to be. It would shift when I would want to. Again, these are all just major improvements done in the sake of driving. Overall though, I'm very impressed with the car. I do think that this is a giant step forward for Hyundai. I can't imagine how responsive and how amazing the manual might be. I really wish I would have gotten a chance to drive that one. But after driving this dual clutch version, I won't lie to you guys, I might actually even consider buying the dual clutch over the stick shift. I know that sounds crazy, but again, with how responsive the sport mode was and the way the transmission responded, it was just a very substantial difference. And adding it up with the new suspension and the less aggressive tune, it was night and day. Actually, I should mention that this was including all the driver aids on, so I didn't turn off traction control or stability. It never actually cut my power off. And I do feel that boost kicked in very linear. There was your typical lag just like in the first generation, but once it got past that, the car was very happy and stayed in boost, and there was no stuttering. So for those of you who were very early adopters of the first Veloster, having issues with the fuel line cutting out your power because you didn't have enough fuel, every issue that you could possibly think of from the first gen has been completely eliminated and dealt with accordingly in this new model. And honestly, what more could you ask for? Hyundai listened and they improved on the platform in every possible way. But guys, that basically concludes my hands-on. The car is amazing. I'm super happy to see all these great improvements, and I can only imagine what the N is going to drive like or be like. This is just an overall major step forward for the company and for the KTM scene as a whole. Again, I'm not going to discuss price or anything like that, just because at the end of the day, this was my hands-on and I just wanted to give you guys my impression of the vehicle. I can't wait to see it in capable hands and to see what can be accomplished once people start, you know, putting and replacing parts and tuning this car up a little bit. If you guys want to see more of the consumer side and you guys are looking to actually legitimately buy one, then I would suggest looking at reviews, whether it's printed or via YouTubers, just so you guys can get an idea about that. But my overall goal was just to kind of give you my impression of what the new car is and if it's worth it and if the changes were substantial. It's up to you guys to determine whether the new model is worth it and if it's right for you, or if you'd rather look at another model. A really viable option that's a lot more affordable, that has some of these improvements done already, might be the Elantra Sport Sedan. You know, my advice, take a look at that. If you guys are on the market to try to buy this car and you guys are somewhere in San Diego, North County, LA area, and you're willing to drive a little bit, please come down to Escondido Hyundai and ask for Amy, who's in internet sales. The reason why I'm bringing this up is not just do they help with this video, but they're actually one of the dealerships that isn't marking up the Veloster. So as we speak, I've seen a lot of dealerships marking up the Veloster a few $1,000s or more, and Hyundai of Escondido is actually not doing any of that. If anything, they're actually applying the proper rebates, so you might even be able to get it for a little bit cheaper than what everyone else is selling it for. So again, if you're really interested, here's the phone number to get a hold of Hyundai of Escondido. Go online, make an appointment, ask for Amy in internet sales, and you know, hopefully if that's what you guys want, you guys will be walking out with an amazing car. And I'll see you guys later on this week with our normal video. I wanted to put this video out as fast as possible because again, these cars are just now hitting dealerships, and I thought you guys might want an opinion for someone that's more of an enthusiast rather than consumer. So hopefully that was informative. Again, if there's any questions that I didn't address, please feel free to comment down below. But I'll see you guys in the next episode as usual. Bye.